Good evening, everyone, and thank you to everyone who helped make this evening possible in the Graham Foundation, as well as this lovely space. The story I want to share with you this evening is a rather extraordinary story. It's a story about several thousand volunteers literally revolutionizing humanitarian response. And the key word is volunteers, not disaster response professionals, not humanitarian crisis professionals with decades of experience, but volunteers, everyday individuals like you and I who got together and revolutionized humanitarian response. And the story starts with Ushahidi. And this is actually back in 2007 during the post-election violence in Kenya where we came to be. Basically, the mainstream media was not reporting on all the human rights abuses that were taking place. The NGOs that were supposed to share information were not sharing information. So we decided to apply this crowdsourcing approach that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with in terms of Wikipedia, allowing the crowd to put together an encyclopedia. We decided to apply that to crisis information. And the map we put up in a few days looked something like this. This was the first incarnation of Ushahidi, which, by the way, means witness in Swahili. This number here is a text message number that anybody inside Kenya could text for free and report any observation of human rights abuses that they witnessed. And we would then map this information. It was a way for the crowd to report what was going on around them. So what Ushahidi does is basically take this crowdsourcing approach and allow people to tell their own story, whether it's using mobile phones, SMS, or calling in, or it's using email and saying, this is what I saw, or this is what happened, or submitting pictures or video footage. In a way, what Ushahidi does is aggregate and collect all this information across different media in near real time to reconstruct a story that's unfolding. And one of the things we've added in order for this to be facilitated is smartphones, smartphone apps in particular. So we've worked on a number of different mobile phone type or brands and makes to develop these smartphone applications that allow you to quickly take a picture and send that picture off or annotate it. Say, okay, I'm in downtown Kampala, I've seen riots, here's the picture, I happen to be around the corner. I annotate the picture saying riots with these individuals, and I press submit, and then you can map that in near real time on the Ushahidi website. The platform itself has been downloaded several thousand times and deployed in hundreds of different ways across the world, from the swine flu outbreak, as well as Al Jazeera using the platform during the attack on Gaza. They were the only media group that was allowed into Gaza, so they were literally were texting and using Twitter to update what they were seeing in near real time. There have been a number of applications of Ushahidi for election monitoring in India, most recently in the Sudan, as well as right now, currently in the Philippines as well. So civil society organizations taking this free and open source platform and using it themselves to try and create transparency and accountability in different ways. Disaster response during the flooding and typhoon in the Philippines as well. A number of other applications. Kibera, one of the largest slums in the world, basically allowing individuals who live in these informal settlements to map their own environment themselves. Crime mapping in Atlanta, the Snowmageddon issue in Washington, D.C., drug stockouts in East Africa and Southern Africa as well. There are literally dozens and dozens, wildlife conservation, you name it. And so it's a platform that anybody can take and download and implement themselves and start mapping for whatever purposes they're interested in. Most recently, during the oil Gulf spill, which obviously is still happening, a group in Louisiana, an environmental group, decided to deploy Ushahidi to monitor the impact of the oil spill on the coastline and also on livelihoods, on fishermen and so on. And this is going on now. There's a cell phone number that people can text to and report information, and we've just developed an iPhone app as well for people to quickly take pictures. And one other thing is we're working with a group out of MIT that uses garbage bags inflated with helium and attached to basically digital cameras, and basically with a rope, and they let these bags, balloons, go up in the air hundreds and hundreds of feet up and take pictures of the impact of the oil spill is having along the coastline. It's been used in Lima, Peru as well, with slum areas to basically allow individuals in the slum to, for the first time, see a bird's eye view of where they're living and to make better decisions on where we should sort of build certain things and latrines and so on. So it's a pretty exciting space. I started out with Haiti, and I'm going to now give you a sort of the story of Haiti. Basically, January 12th, around 5 p.m., this massive earthquake strikes Haiti. I found out about it a couple hours later on CNN. I had some good friends in downtown Port-au-Prince at the time, didn't know whether they were still alive or not, as it happens they are, and decided immediately to call the Ushahidi tech team and basically say, listen, we've got to move on this. We've got to set up a crisis mapping platform and start mapping as fast as we can. So several hours later, we had something that looked like this, where we were starting to map events that were being reported on the disaster in Haiti. The first events that were coming out were primarily from Twitter. There were a number of individuals inside Haiti that were tweeting live about what was happening, as well as I found out from colleague Rob Monroe, who's here as well this evening, Facebook. Facebook happened to have a number of chat groups or groups that were simply sharing information on some of the events that were being reported. So we were basically taking that information and mapping it as quickly as we could. A couple days-ish later, we as an Ushahidi team, so we're basically a very small non-profit tech company, an African initiative. We don't have that many people on hand to do near real-time crisis mapping. And I also happen to wear another hat. I'm a PhD candidate at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. So after 2 days of trying to map and keep up with the information that was coming out, you know, what happens usually in a disaster is during the first couple of days there's a vacuum of information. Nobody knows what's going on. The UN is scrambling, the humanitarian organizations are scrambling. But then after 48 hours, you've got the mainstream media. Now you've got social media that basically explodes, that starts running 24 hours nonstop. And so we have this explosion of information that's coming out, and we couldn't keep up. So I reached out to my colleagues at the Fletcher School, hundreds of graduate students as well as the undergraduate students at Tufts University, to help map all these events that were coming out in near real time, to help comb, you know, the mainstream news, BBC, CNN. We had a couple chaps who were listening to Haitian Creole radio and listening to people calling in and saying, this just happened, and mapping that information. And we started, this is actually a picture of my living room. We started in my living room in January. It was snowing outside in Boston, and all we did, we're not talking much at this point. We're just behind our laptops, mapping as quickly as we can. And what we were using in terms of sources were, so there's this vast information ecosystem that we're now able to leverage, unlike maybe 20, 30 years ago. We were literally live Skyping with the search and rescue operations in downtown Port-au-Prince. They were giving us information, we were giving information back, the Marine Corps and so on. We had folks watching TV. We had folks looking through UN situation reports and extracting events and mapping them so that they could be more actionable for the disaster response community. What else? Flickr, we were pulling in pictures that were tagged, people who were on the ground who were taking pictures and tagging them as Haiti. We were pulling that information in, trying to geolocate it as well. And videos as well, YouTube videos, Vimeo, and so on. Trying to map all this information as quickly as we could. 5 days after, even when we had about 30 sort of volunteers at Tufts University, it was not enough. We quickly scaled up, and within about 2 weeks, we had trained several hundred volunteers, not only in Tufts University in Boston, but we had our Fletcher alumni in Washington, D.C., who set up their own situation room. We had the Geneva Institute of Graduate Studies in Geneva, in Switzerland, also set up their own situation room to help sort of balance the sort of the time difference so we could actually get some sleep. And then they would take over when we were sleeping and continue to do the crisis mapping. We had folks in London, as well as Montreal, as well as Portland, Oregon, as well, doing all this mapping. Again, hundreds of volunteers just dropping what they had to do and simply mapping. In about a week, we got a lot of attention on the mainstream media. A lot of different groups were interviewing us and so on. And this was very helpful. Within this particular time, I'm going to say something later, but we also set up, or some colleagues set up a shortcode, which is, again, like I showed you in Kenya, 6007. It was a different number that allowed Haitians to text in their most urgent needs. And this is a number that you should see here. Haitians can text 4636 to report situations. This helped us get the word out with the humanitarian community, the disaster community. We also had some partners on the ground who were on local Haitian radio, who were getting the word out, saying, you know, text this number, we're mapping this number, responders are paying attention to this number. A week, or no, rather 10 days later, Secretary Clinton, in a public speech, mentioned the role that the technology community was playing in the disaster response in Haiti by setting up these interactive maps. That was not only Ushahidi, but also Sahana and OpenStreetMap and a couple other individuals. This is what the map looked like probably couple of weeks after the earthquake, we had mapped, if you look at the top right, we had mapped over 2,000 events. Right now it's about 3,500 individual dots that were mapped in quasi-near real time on this particular platform. And within about 5 days, we had the disaster responders sort of coming to us. We had no time to do much outreach ourselves. So we had FEMA calling in on day 5 saying, folks, whatever you do, do not stop mapping. You're saving lives. We found out later on that the Marine Corps was also using the platform, using the SMS, using the mapping in order to send out choppers to rescue people, to evacuate people. And the Coast Guard as well were particularly active. This is what the map looks like very quickly. Anybody can go to this, haiti.ushahidi.com, and it was really an all-volunteer effort. There were various ways that I mentioned you could report to this particular map. When the cell phone network was sort of down in Haiti during the first few days, we couldn't use a shortcode, a local number. So we set up an international number that anybody could text and report on incidents that were important for the disaster response. People could email in. We were getting hundreds of emails a day. We were also monitoring Twitter. And you could go directly on this website and submit an incident yourself as well. If you were part of the diaspora in Boston, they were really active, helping us to basically submit incidents and map them in near real time. If you scroll down, you have different functionalities and features. I invite you to just go to the platform itself and look for yourself. You could look at the last 48 hours of events, and that would go from cluster-based to point-based. And you click on one of these events, and you see what was reported by text message. This is about a makeshift IDP camp that is in dire need of supplies. If you click on that further, you get to this particular report with more information. And what we did is add a discussion forum section at the end of this particular report, so people could start commenting in. Now, this is just an example of one thread discussion, right? But we had an example of an orphanage that was running out of water where we had about 12 responses, people who were basically commenting back and forth and saying, okay, the kids have been moved across the street to this address because the foundations are no longer secure. So it allows people to take ownership over the process and help each other out. It really is, in a way, it is crowdsourcing and crowdsourcing response. This is a story of SMS, and it really, I think this is probably the most powerful story to come out of the whole Haiti response. The fact that text messaging, right? There's different ways to get information out. You can put a sign out, and this is actually a picture in downtown Port-au-Prince. But about 30% or so of individuals in Haiti owned a cell phone, and many more could get access to a cell phone. So clearly the answer was going to be to get a text message number for people to text in their most urgent needs, as well as their locations. So Josh Nesbitt, who just had to step out and catch a plane to New York, sent out a tweet a few hours, I think, after the earthquake, and basically asked for help on setting up this shortcode. Somebody in Cameroon saw that, in Cameroon of all places, saw this tweet. I love Cameroon. No, great football team. Saw this tweet and said, oh, I can connect you with this chaps who are working as Digicel. Digicel is the main telecom company in Haiti, which obviously we need to work with if we're going to get a shortcode. And so within a few hours, Josh was in touch, State Department was helping out, and some colleagues basically who got together during this disaster response operation helped to get this 4636 number set up. This is Rob, who's sitting right there, who you can talk to later. And Brian Herbert from Ushahidi basically set up another platform from scratch to translate the information that was coming in, because the vast majority of the text messages that we were receiving in real time were in Creole. They were in Haitian Creole. So Rob spent some time mobilizing thousands of volunteers across the US and the world to help crowdsource the translation of these text messages in near real time. And I believe the average sort of turnaround time of the translation was 5 to 10 minutes. And Brian basically set up the initial platform that these users could go onto, a website that these users could access, and as they were getting text messages in Creole, could translate them and then send them to us at Ushahidi in Boston so we could map them and then pass them on to the first responders. This is what actually the platform looked like way at the beginning, the good old days. This is sort of the workflow that came to be. We partnered with some fantastic groups, CrowdFlower and Samasource. We moved the translation that originally took place with volunteers in the US and across the world. We moved that translation process to Haiti so that individuals in Haiti were doing the translation of these text messages themselves, and this kind of mechanical Turk services, microtasking, they were able to get an income out of doing this translation as well. So providing the disaster-affected communities with a source of income to translate these text messages was a big shift also in the operation, and something that we're very much looking forward to replicating in future disasters. So the way that the 4636 setup worked was folks would send information to this number, texting information. The translation would happen thanks to what Rob and Brian did, as well as the thousands of volunteers spending hundreds of hours translating. Then we would geolocate this information, i.e., for example, we would get a text message about an orphanage running out of water. The name of the orphanage, we could try and Google that, but it was nowhere to be found. So sometimes it took us a lot of time to try and identify the GPS coordinates of a particular event. And the humanitarian community only works in GPS units. They're not going to work in street addresses. They don't have time. When they're going to send out the choppers, they want precise GPS coordinates to go and evacuate people, help people, and so on. So we spent a lot of time doing that, and thanks to the Haitian diaspora in Boston spending hours and hours and hours and hours with us in a basement, mapping their own country. Clearly, they're the experts. They know their country better than anybody else. And we actually had a taxi driver who spent many hours with us in the basement saying, oh, this is where the pharmacy is, this is where you go through the slums, this is the name of that street. It was pretty amazing. And meeting these community leaders from the Haitian diaspora was probably one of the best things that came out of this. Incredibly warm people, and they were so wanting to help, right? They had sent money, they had sent clothing or food or what have you, and they wanted to do more. And for the first time, here was a platform that allowed them to directly get involved in the disaster response operations in their country, which was pretty amazing. This is the back end of Ushahidi. So if you were logging in as one of the volunteers, this is what you would see. I don't know if the video is necessarily going to work. But so let me just go back. So at the time, we had received about 14,000 text messages. I think we received about 25,000, and we sorted them by most urgent. So we mapped several thousand out of these that were life and death text messages. If you were to press on SMS here, this particular link, you would literally get the latest list of text messages that had just come in from Haiti and just been translated. So likely 10 minutes after leaving a cell phone, those text messages were translated, and we would get them. The volunteers, the student volunteers in Boston at Tufts University would get this information. If you press read more, you get the translation. So here, this was about a university student probably who had been potentially buried under rubble in a university. So we would get that information translated in near real time, and we could reply to the individual who had sent that original text message in Creole. And this two-way communication in near real time with disaster-affected communities, I assure you, at this scale of 1,000 text messages coming in every day, is completely unprecedented in the history of disaster response. I come primarily from the humanitarian response community and now dabbling in sort of the technology community, but I can tell you this has never happened in the work that I've done in Ethiopia or in the Sudan or in East Timor. This is completely new, the ability to do this kind of two-way communication. And the number of times that I was in the Situation Room in the basement at Tufts University and closed my eyes, I mean, I could have honestly thought I was in an emergency room in a hospital. We had actually an English Creole medical dictionary on the table at all times. And I would just listen to some of the volunteers like Roz, which was one of the key volunteers in this operation, who would say, okay, just got a text message, one woman leg crushed, one man bleeding from the head. It was pretty amazing to get that kind of information, and quasi-traumatic, I'll be completely honest. But then trying to get the text message geolocated as quickly as we could in order to fast-track that to the Marine Corps and to the Coast Guard so that they could literally, like I said, send out the choppers and get help to these individuals as quickly as possible. So here, if you were to press send, this is a text box you would get. You had some presets here, so I could quickly ask for more location information if there was not sufficient location information to make this text message and this alert as actionable as possible. And of course, since the majority of us did not speak Creole, we had some presets in Creole as well. And you could add dozens of these presets, whether if you were working in South Korea, you could have dozens of presets in Korean that would allow you to quickly respond and ask for more information. And this helped to speed up the whole process. Another feature that was, I think, important and will continue to be increasingly important in the future is allowing disaster responders, as well as the local communities, I think eventually, to subscribe to the specific types of information that they're most interested in. So if I'm the World Food Program, for example, and let's say I'm based in Jacmel, I can take that cursor and point it at Jacmel and have a radius and define that radius by 1 kilometer to about 100 kilometers and say, right, if any dots, if any alerts get mapped within this particular area, I want to know about it. And because I'm not going to be behind my desktop in Port-au-Prince or off somewhere else, I want to get that as a text message. So you can actually add, if you scroll down, you can add your email as well as your cell phone number, so that when a dot does fall into this particular area, perhaps your area of responsibility, you get that text message automatically in real time. And what we've added as well is you can tag exactly the kind of information you want. So if I'm the World Food Program, maybe I want specific information on anything having to do with alerts on food distribution or water distribution, and perhaps nothing else. I just want to focus on that. That's my mandate. That's what I have the capacity to respond to. We've also added a keyword box as well. So maybe if you're looking for an individual that went missing, you could put the person's name. If somebody reports that person and say, okay, David has been found, you would get that text message automatically. If you're interested in riots or trying to control the security situation, you could put riots, violence, and so on, and again, get that text message in real time. So the idea of Ushahidi in many ways is to improve real-time and what I call real space situational awareness, to really know what's going on in your immediate area around the block. There's a riot. Around the block, there's a fire or something. Be able to respond to that in real time. So, as I mentioned, we had a number of organizations that were following this feed, the SMS feed, the mapping, and so on. We didn't know that the Marine Corps were following us at all until a few weeks after they got in touch. We were just mapping because we felt we had to do it. We felt we were being helpful, and FEMA had weighed in and said, don't stop mapping. But a few weeks later, we found out from the Marine Corps that they were tracking the Ushahidi Haiti platform on an hourly basis. And this individual who wrote and allowed us to make this all public basically said, I can vouch that your site has saved hundreds of lives. And yeah, the site was important, but the site without the thousands of volunteers, the translators, and the folks who were monitoring the media and mapping the text messages would have been a site with 0 dots if those individuals hadn't been there. So really, what's unprecedented as well is the level of volunteer effort that has gone into this particular disaster response, and we hope we're going to see now in the future as well. So another quick quote before I wrap up. This was actually the quote that I keep on referring to. Don't stop whatever you're doing, just keep mapping. So that's my story, and in closing, I would just say that for me, what's also amazing about this is this technology, a platform that came out of Africa, came out during the Kenyan post-election violence, that have been deployed in Afghanistan, in Mexico, in Chile during the earthquake, and was being used by volunteers in Boston to help save lives in Haiti. And I think that's a pretty remarkable story. So thank you very much.